Today I'd like to talk about macro photography and some of the things that you can do to enhance taking macro photographs. I'm going to start with my digital SLR camera. In this case I'm using a Nikon D7000 and I'm just using it with the kit lens to start out with. And so the lens that came with it, it's an 18 to 105 zoom lens. And it actually by itself can't do what's a true macro, but we can get some close-up photography. And the difference between that is close-up just makes it look big and it makes it look close so that it is actually life-size or larger on the print that you see or on your computer. But what true macro means is that the image you're trying to capture is actually projected onto your film or sensor life size. So just as an example, if this postage stamp, let's see if we can get this where you can see it, was your sensor and you were trying to take a picture of this marble, the projection from the camera onto that sensor would have to be life-sized, which that doesn't really show up real well, but you get the idea. So you'd actually have a life-size projection of the marble onto the sensor to be a true macro image. Now the next thing you need to consider on macro is camera shake. Because you're zoomed in so close and the object of your photo is so close to the lens in most cases, any kind of vibration or camera shake is going to cause problems with their captured image. So you need to have a really good tripod, and in this case I'm using a Ravelli tripod with a ball head, and I prefer ball heads to panning heads because I can actually move the camera into any position I need very quickly, and then I can lock it down in that position. And I just really like them. They're really nice. And so I highly recommend a good sturdy tripod. This one has fairly decent legs. The upper part is partitioned. This one actually goes over 65 inches tall, which is really nice, so you don't have to bend over to look through things. Although when you're doing macro photography, you're still going to be bending over quite a bit because you'll usually have the object of your photo sitting on a table. Also, in thinking about keeping everything as stable as possible, I use a cable release. Now this one is a fairly fancy electronic one. It also does an intervalometer and a bunch of other stuff, but for macro photography and in this session I'm just going to be using it as a basic cable release. And the reason I want to do that is because anytime I push this button on the camera, I'm actually introducing shake to the camera and the tripod, and it's just better to get that off camera through like this cable, which may have a little bit of swing, but it's not going to be nearly as big an effect as if I was actually punching the buttons on the camera. Another reason I want to do that is because, like in my case, I'm on a second floor of an apartment building, and if anybody slams their door, or even if they're just stomping around next door, I can feel the vibrations through the floor. And if I can feel the vibrations, the camera is also going to feel that vibration. So I want to try and minimize that as much as possible. Now the next little goodie, and this will actually help us get a lens like this, it's not actually a macro lens, into the realm of true macro capabilities. Well, all they are is an extension tube. And this is a set of 3 extension tubes by Zycos. It's fairly inexpensive. There's nothing in them other than the mounts. The through part is just a hole. You can stick your finger through there. There's no lenses. This particular set, it is an Nikon set, and it does have the connectors so that when I have this connected to a lens like this, it is also a Nikon lens, it does transfer the autofocusing and all the auto features that those lenses have. The bigger the extension, the closer you can get to your subject to your lens. And you can stack them so that you can have this entire stack between, and they go between the lens and the body. So you'd have your body, then this, and then your lens. Although on some lenses, eventually, if you get this extension too long, the actual focal length of your lens gets pulled back inside the interior of the lens, and that won't do you any good if your subject is sitting out here in front of your lens. Now you can use, and I do use fairly often, a true macro lens. Now this is one from Nikon. It's a fixed lens. It's a 40mm lens, so it has no zoom. Nikon calls their macro lenses micro. I don't really know why they've changed their naming convention from what other people call their lenses. It's just something they do. So a micro lens in Nikon speak is a true macro lens. It's able to focus your subject life size onto the sensor or the camera. Now this lens, it's not just strictly a macro lens, it's also a great kick around lens for everyday use. And 40mm in a crop sensor lens, which this Nikon is more like a 50 or 60mm lens on a 35mm camera. Now some of the other things that I add in is mostly lighting enhancement. So I have a very cool little lamp on a tripod that's fully adjustable, and it's also quite bright, as you can see. And the one thing I haven't used it for, but if you are a foodie or a food photographer and you like taking pictures as it's getting prepared, this has magnetic feet, so you could actually stick this to the hood of the stove and point the light down at your subject. Also good anywhere that you happen to have metal. I'm just using a wooden table, so don't really get much effect from having magnetic feet on this tripod in this occasion, but it's something to keep in mind, and it can be very handy. Now I also do use flash fairly often in macro photography, and the way I prefer to do that is with transceivers. What they are is one goes on the camera and it mounts just like a flash does, and then the other one mounts to your strobe, and all it does is it senses when the camera gets fired, sends out a signal and fires the strobe. And it's really nice to have them off camera so that you can place them wherever you want. Now my main strobes I use are Yongnuo's, and I have a 560 and a 560 This is the 2 model. It just has an LCD screen, which the original 560 was just little LEDs that went up in sequence. And the nice thing with these, you can bend it, twirl it, whatever you need to do, and it's also an adjustable output flash, so I can dial it way down to 1/8 of full power. So you would just flip that on here, and then what I do, and these flashes come with them, they have a little flat table mount, so I can just flop that on there, and then I have my little flash that I can set anywhere on the table where I need it. It's very handy. The drawback to that is I usually, even if I'm using this little light to light up, I usually use this on the tripod as a backlight into the back part of the flower, and it gives just a really nice lighting effect. And then I'll throw my strobe off to the side to give me a little more depth and a little bit of shadow inside. But the shadows can be a little bit too harsh. So what I use to help soften that shadow is what's called a slave flash. And all that is, and they're cheap. This was like 10 bucks off Amazon, and it's Zycos as well. Same brand as the extension tubes. And what a slave flash does is it can sense through a little light sensor here when a flash goes off, and if it senses a flash going off, it goes off. And what I normally use that for is to hold above my subject, and I'll actually hold it out of camera range, or at least out of this video camera range, sort of high and above, because this, I can't adjust the power output on it. The only way I can adjust how bright it is by how far away I'm holding it from my subject. And I usually do directly down from the slave flash. Now, another piece of equipment that a lot of macro photographers use, and I haven't used it too often, but it is great under certain circumstances, is what they call a ring light. And they're not that expensive. This one is from Polaroid, and again, you can get it from Amazon. Doesn't seem like it was terribly expensive. I know it was less than 50 bucks, I'm pretty sure. And the way it works, come on, here we go, is it just has a ring of lights, and then it came with a whole bunch of adapters that you can put in here, and it will clamp, or actually it's an adapter ring that goes onto your lens, and it came with a whole bunch to fit almost any filter size you can think of. And then this just clamps onto that ring, and so it sits on the very front of your lens and projects out this very uniform light. What that is really good for is documentary type photography of particularly flat objects like stamp collections or coin collections, or other photographs that you may want to try to digitally restore. If you don't have a scanner, then you can use your camera in macro mode with one of those ring lights, and it provides a very nice uniform light on your subject. And I think that does it for this video. I just wanted to talk about the equipment I'm going to use, and in the next video I'll actually set up the macro shot. And what we're going to be shooting are these lobelia flowers, and they've been in bloom for a couple of months for me already. I live in Las Vegas, so it's been warm here quite a bit. It's May now, and so these have actually been in bloom since about the end of March, and they're starting to get a little scraggly. But the nice thing with macro photography, especially on subjects like this that are really quite tiny, your depth of field is extremely shallow, so you won't see anything other than the flower that we're focused on. And so that will be the topic of the next video. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.